Welcome, everybody, to the very first episode of No Hedge. This is a new show we're putting together that's going to be a week-to-week NFL betting show where we're trying to find some value on the NFL slate to not only win us some money, but to hopefully bring you guys along for the ride with us. I'm your host, Collin. With me is my co-host, Bog. And Bog, NFL is finally back. We've been waiting forever for this, and honestly, it's the best time of year. How you feeling?
Man, I'm feeling great. I've been waiting for NFL to come back since the Super Bowl ended. So, we got through the free agency process, we got through the draft, we got through the preseason training camp, and now, now we're here. So I couldn't be more excited. And man, let's get started. Let's dive right in.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, a little disclaimer for Week 1 NFL betting. So, as you might already know, if you've been a NFL bettor for a little while now, since it started to get legal in sports books across the country, NFL can be a very cutthroat league to be betting. On any given day, the favorites could be hitting like wild, and then another weekend, all of a sudden, the underdogs come out and they're hungry and they're giving good favorites a run for their money. So, especially when you're betting Week 1 in the NFL, keep in mind that we're really only going off of preseason hype, what we're seeing in training camps, off-season buzz. This really puts us in a position where it's a lot of speculation with Week 1 in taking some of these picks here. So as long as you keep that in mind, keep your bets simple, one unit plays. You don't want to do anything crazy Week 1 to dig yourself a hole in case your off-season predictions don't end up panning out for the first week. And I don't think there's a better example than the first game of the 2023 NFL season and what we saw last night with the Lions playing the Chiefs for Thursday Night Football. This was a really interesting game, not only for the fact that obviously you got the defending Super Bowl champs, Kansas City at home with one of the most prolific quarterbacks and Patrick Mahomes going up against a Lions team that's been getting a lot of hype coming into the 2023 season. They obviously had one of the most high-powered offenses last year. They did a lot of work in the offseason to bolster that defense, and everybody going into last night's game was really heavy on the Lions here, outside of the public bettors that were obviously taking Kansas City. But despite all this, going into this game, I saw all this attention getting thrown at the getting thrown at the Lions. And because of this, I was almost inclined to just take the Chiefs outright in this game, regardless of the spread. I know the Chiefs have been struggling to cover over the years, but as we saw it pan out last night, yes, the Lions did win, money line cash. It was an easy cover, but if you really watch the game closely, this could have ended a lot differently in Kansas City. There were a lot of luck variance plays that went in the Lions' favor last night that really swung this game to them getting an easy cover and even cashing at the money line. We saw a 4th and 2 fake punt on their own 20 that ended up leading to an 80, 90-yard touchdown drive. There was also a pick six thrown, a drop right off of Kadarius Toney's hands that led to an easy 7 points for the Lions when they were already down 7. Later in the game, there was even more drops from a lot of Chiefs receivers in key positions. So yes, the Lions covered, but if you really did watch that game last night, the Chiefs definitely could have ran away with that game had some of their playmakers stepped up in the absence of Travis Kelce being on the sidelines. And this is just the NFL, and this is the nature of NFL betting. Anything can happen at any given moment. So we really just want to drive that point home when we're talking about these Week 1 games. Keep it to one unit. Keep it simple. Don't do anything crazy. You don't want to dig yourself a hole. And hey, if you end up hitting your bets Week 1, you're starting off with a nice little cushion going into Week 2 of the season. But again, it's all speculation. So don't take anything for granted this week. But with that being said, we're going to jump into our picks for this week. Bog and I have picked out 6 games. There's a little bit of discrepancy between a couple of the picks here where I might not be on one and Bogdan, that's just his sole pick and vice versa. But there's also a couple games in here that we're going to be backing together because we really feel like there's some good value sitting in these matchups. But without further ado, let's get into our first pick and our first matchup. This is going to be a joint pick for Bogdan and I. We got the Jacksonville Jaguars going into Indy to play the Colts. The Jags opened at a -3.5 spread. They're now sitting at 4.5. So obviously the line's been pushed a little bit with some of that hype around this Jacksonville Jaguars offense. And the money metrics is actually showing a little bit of the opposite here, where the Jags are getting 64% of the bets, but only 48% of the money. So it looks like some sharp bettors are taking a stab on Anthony Richardson and the Colts here. But Bogdan, we're not feeling that way. So start us off with at least why you're feeling confident about our pick with the Jaguars here.
Yeah, well, I'll say this. I mean, I like a lot of stuff that the Colts did in the offseason, right? You brought in Shane Steichen, who had a lot of success as the Philadelphia Eagles offensive coordinator. They had a great draft, right? They drafted their QB for the future, has a lot of similar traits to what, Jalen Hurts had in Philly, maybe a little bit bigger, but arm talent's not there. So, I can see the appeal for the Colts. I can definitely see it. However, I think the Jaguars are just actually a way safer pick here. You saw what they did last year, kind of had a slow start, but Doug Peterson got that team on track. The addition of Calvin Ridley is only going to open up this offense, and they have a lot of speed on both sides of the ball. I think, you have a rookie quarterback going in against a team that went to the playoffs last year, beat the Chargers in a crazy, crazy way towards the end, crazy comeback, and then gave the Chiefs a run for their money too. So, they ended up losing, but this team went deep in the playoffs, and against a rookie quarterback, I think the Jacksonville Jaguars are a safe pick here.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why we're going in on this pick together. I mean, I understand that the Colts are taking a stab at hopefully who's going to be their franchise quarterback in Richardson, but personally, one of my big angles for Week 1 betting is to target these rookie quarterbacks. The NFL is a completely different caliber than what they're used to, playing at the collegiate level. They're just a complete jump in not only talent, but physicality, and not even just physicality, but the quickness of the game too. Everything's going to be moving so fast around these guys. So in this position, we're going to be back in the much better offense, very explosive offense, like you said, with the addition of Calvin Ridley coming in to this receiving core to give Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk a little bit of assistance there, and obviously T. Law having all those weapons. We're not going to overthink this pick. We're going to take the Jaguars in this spot. The Colts really did struggle last year, especially when they had to bring in Jeff Saturday as their interim head coach. The defense left a lot to be desired. Their offense really wasn't clicking. So all things considered, we're going to be taking the Jaguars. We're laying a little bit of a weird line in this game with the figure sitting at 4.5, but especially with Week 1 games, we're going to not try to overthink these games. And even though it's a little bit of a weird spread, not getting it at a field goal or less, I think this Jaguars team can easily win by a touchdown. So again, we're not going to overthink this pick. Fade the rookie quarterback and take the much better quarterback in T. Law in this high-powered Jaguars offense for this Week 1 1 o'clock game. And moving over to our second 1 o'clock game here, we got the Carolina Panthers going into Atlanta to play the Falcons. The Panthers opened up at a plus 2.5. The spread has since jumped to plus 3.5. So again, a little bit of bets pushing this line towards the Falcons. And the sharp money metrics for this game are looking pretty much in our favor with the Falcons, as they're getting about 59% of the bets and 85% of the money. So this is my pick personally. Bogdan's going to be staying away from this one, but I know you do see some of the value in what I'm going for here. But again, I just reiterated this for the Colts-Jags game. I'm just going to be fading these rookie quarterbacks, and I actually have a little bit more optimism for Anthony Richardson. He's got a little bit more of that physical build for the NFL, whereas Bryce Young, I think he's going to be completely overwhelmed here in Week 1. The Falcons have done a lot of good work in the offseason to bolster that defense, and especially getting Bijan Robinson in this offense, which is already a heavy run offense and a pretty creative run offense at that. You got Desmond Ridder coming into his second year in this system. Again, just not overthinking these picks. I'm going to back the Falcons here, even with the hook at 3.5. Bogdan, even though you're not tailing this game, what do you think about this pick? Do you see where I'm coming from for this one?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think this, Atlanta D-line is going to give Bryce Young fits. I mean, they brought in Calais Campbell, who's 6'8". They got David Onyemata, right? Grady Jarrett's there. I mean, they're long, they're strong, they're physical. Not only are they going to overwhelm that Panthers O-line, but they're gonna put their hands up. They're gonna make it tough for Bryce Young to complete those passes. So, Atlanta, with what they've done, especially the defensive side of the ball, improving the O-line, improving the secondary, and offensively, I mean, they got Bijan Robinson, right? Exciting, electric player. It's a power run offense. So I think it's a safe pick here, right? I can, maybe Bryce Young comes in. He wants to show the NFL what's good, puts the Falcons on alert. But I think it's a safe pick here, taking Atlanta -3.5.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really going into this one confident. I'm hoping that my two fades of the rookie quarterbacks in the 1 o'clock slate is going to pay off. But again, like I said earlier in the show, who knows with week 1 in the NFL? This league's crazy. Anything can happen at any given moment. And like you said, maybe Bryce Young comes out and shocks me and makes me take back everything I've said here today. So I'm pretty confident, but yet again, who knows what's going to happen? I'm taking the Falcons here at -3.5. And moving over to one of your solo picks here, Bog, we got the Tennessee Titans going into New Orleans to play the Saints. This game opened up at Titans +3.5. The spread has since come down to +3 in the Titans' favor. And the money metrics for this game are heavily back in your bet in this game, with the Titans getting 62% of the bets, but 94% of the money. So tell me why you and the Sharps are aligned on this game and why you like the Titans so much.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at this matchup, right? You have a lot of, hype coming in around the Saints. I know they got Derek Carr. They got a great defense. They got some weapons on offense, good rushing attack. But, people are forgetting about the Titans. Like, they're not talked about enough, because I know they drafted Malik Willis a few years ago. They drafted Will Levis last year. But they're not starting a quarterback, right? You still got Ryan Tannehill starting. This guy won games before. He's been to the playoffs. He gets another weapon in DeAndre Hopkins to work with, right? He got Derrick Henry behind him, who's just going to grind out, hopefully grind out the Saints defense. And defensively, they're a solid team. I like Rabel week 1. I think they've been going kind of under the radar. I think there's a lot of value in this pick, and I'm taking the Titans +3.
Yeah, absolutely. And even though I'm not betting this game with Bog, I definitely see the value in this one. Like you said, Ryan Tannehill definitely is a little bit underappreciated at quarterback. Like you said, he's taken this Titans team to the postseason and has won football games before. The Titans defense also last year does not get enough credit because of how diminished their roster got to injury, especially at the latter half of the season. So we really saw the Titans fall off last year after starting off with, I believe, was a 7-2 record. So everything considered here, especially with the hype that you're getting on the Saints, this could be a good spot to fade that preseason hype on a Saints team that's got Derek Carr coming into a new system here. And like you said, King Henry's in that backfield, and if they're able to establish a run in week 1 here, the Titans could be a very safe pick, especially getting points on the road. Now, obviously, the home teams usually get a little bit of edge in week 1, with everybody needing a little bit of time to get acclimated and get running to finally being back to regular season NFL football away from the training camp. But again, it's week 1, anything could happen, and having those points in this game is definitely going to help you out. So I definitely see the value in what you're chasing with this Titans pick. But moving on to our next game, finally moving on to the 4 o'clock slate here, is one of my personal picks. And despite what you might see behind you, and for anybody listening via podcast, we are big Giants fans. We have the wall behind us absolutely plastered with Giants memorabilia and whatnot. But I'm a bettor. I'm looking for value. I want to win money, and that's the most important thing to me on a week-to-week basis. So for this game, despite me backing one of my big division rivals, I just see too much value in this game to pass up personally, and that would be the Philadelphia Eagles traveling New England to play the Patriots. This game opened up at -4.5 for the Eagles. It's now sitting at -4, so people are buying into this Bill Belichick, big defensive presence at home, week 1 hype. But personally, I'm just not seeing that. Now, although I say that, the sharp money metrics are definitely not going in my favor here. The Eagles are getting 67% of the bets, but only 44% of the money. So again, people are buying into this narrative that it's week 1, you take a home dog getting points at their own stadium. But like I was just saying, I see too much value in the Eagles this game. They've got one of the most talented rosters in the NFL. Now, one of my only concerns with this team is this new, young, Georgia-backed defensive line that they're going to be putting out on the field, especially going up against a Patriots offense that likes to establish the run, likes to assert their dominance in that way to get offensive weapons opened up in the passing game. But you've got Jalen Hurts, you've got Devonta Smith, A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert on the offensive side of the ball, especially with Hurts throwing behind that extremely powerful and loaded Eagles offensive line. I just think that the Eagles are a no-brainer in this spot. Again, I've said this for my first two picks. I'm going to try to not overthink anything in week one here. And really, I just love the Eagles in this spot. I think they could easily win this game by 7, 10, 14 points. So I'm not even going to think about the weird number. I actually got them at -3.5 when the spread dropped down. So I'm getting a little bit of assistance there in the weird scenario. This game somehow ends by a 4-point margin. But again, I like the Eagles in this spot. Putting my bias aside here, I think they're the much stronger team. And Bogdan, what do you think about my pick here?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty logical pick, right? Who's going to score more points, the Patriots offense or the Eagles offense, right? Eagles are a high-powered offense. They got a lot of more offensive firepower. Now, it is week one. I really like the Patriots defense. I think they can get a few stops. I just don't think that the Patriots offense necessarily can put up as much points as the Eagles can offensively. One way for the Patriots, if they can start picking up first downs, running the ball, controlling the to time and the time of possession, maybe anything can happen. But I think from a logical standpoint, Eagles are a pretty safe pick here, just given their offensive firepower. Even though they've got new coordinators on both sides of the ball, I think they're going to be in form.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a good point that you bring up that I didn't mention myself. They do have two new coordinators coming into the system. So it's going to be interesting to see how they get acclimated to those coordinators, obviously running with a little bit different schemes and different approaches on a week-to-week basis, game prepping for their matchups. But again, don't overthink it. I think the Eagles have a much more talented roster, especially on the offensive side of the ball. So I'm going to back the Eagles in this spot. And we have another joint pick coming up here in the 4 o'clock time spot. We got the Las Vegas Raiders going into Denver. The Raiders opened up at a +3.5 spread, and it's still sitting at this figure. I know that the spread did bump up to 4 at one point in the week. I say this because I bet the Broncos at 4 in this spot, which I'm not too ecstatic about seeing that line come down and losing about a half-point edge there. But my assessment with all these other games rolls over into this one. I just think the Broncos have a higher ceiling in this game. And as of right now, the smart money is somewhat backing up that narrative. There's not too much of a discrepancy here. The Broncos are getting about 41% of the bets, but 52% of the money. So the sharps definitely see a little bit of value in the Broncos here. And my biggest angle in this game is the fact that the Raiders defense last year was completely abysmal, and Denver actually touted a not top 5 or top 7 or anything, but they were a top middle of the pack defense last year. And given how poor their offense was under Nathaniel Hackett coming in to be the head coach of the team for last season, despite the fact that their offense was so bad and was constantly putting this defense back out on the field every other minute because they constantly had to punt the football away, this Broncos defense still put up good figures and points allowed over the span of the season. So now hopefully with Sean Payton coming into this team, he can revive this Broncos culture a little bit. He could get Russ back to at least somewhat close to where he used to play in the past. I think that the Broncos offense is going to establish the run early in this game. They're going to assert their dominance on this Raiders defense that can really struggle in the run at times. So given all these factors, especially the Broncos being at home, I'm taking the Broncos here, and you're tailing me on this pick. So let's hear your assessment for it.
Yeah, I like Sean Payton week one. I think, he took a year off. He's coming in. He has something to prove. I know Russ had a down year last year. Maybe part due to coaching and whatnot, but I think the Denver Broncos roster is just a lot more talented. Even though I love what the Raiders done in the draft, got some good guys there. Getting Tyree Wilson and getting Michael Mayer and a couple guys, but I think I like Sean Payton more than the Raiders head coach in this game. I think he's going to try to come in, trying to assert his coaching in this league. Still, remind the league that he is a top coach, and it's a big division game. It's in Denver. I think that's a big edge playing at Mile High, and I think the Broncos pull it out.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're betting the Broncos here. Bog might get them a little bit better of a figure since he is going to put his bets in tomorrow. I like to try and jump on these games and get a little bit of value earlier in the week. It's worked out for some of the games. Obviously, this one I've lost about a half point. I'm not really going to sweat too much over that. Given our takes on this game, I think the Broncos are a safe pick. Now, I forgot to mention that, yes, Jimmy G is coming into this offense. I know people like Jimmy G.
I love Jimmy G. I love Jimmy G.
He has shown that he's a reliable quarterback when healthy and when able to stay on the field. But I really don't see Jimmy G being necessarily an upgrade from Derek Carr. I think that in terms of arm talent, Derek Carr has the ability to really air it out, to really get the most out of a guy like Devontae Adams in the receiving core. So especially given that, I think that Jimmy G isn't really too much of an upgrade from Carr here. That's just another reason why we're taking the Broncos and really just backing the defense in this game to hold it down week 1 at home and to allow Russ and this offense to get their feet really situated under them and to actually have a positive first week impression for the 2023 season here. So we're both going to be on the Broncos in this game. And now, I did mention that we're trying to keep our bias out of this show and out of this podcast as much as possible. But going into our final game here, we genuinely do see value on our boys, the G-Men, at home Sunday night against the Cowboys. The Cowboys opened up at -2.5, and sharp bettors were quick to jump on this figure, especially given the historical success that the Cowboys have had over the G-Men in the last decade. So the line didn't take long to move up. But again, like we said, we're seeing value in this game. And right now, the sharp money is kind of conflicted in this spot. The Giants are getting 54% of the bets and 56% of the money. So it really is looking like a coin flip here. Obviously, the Giants have the edge by a little bit, but given how close these metrics are, especially compared to all the other games in this slate that we've mentioned, this is going to be a close one. But again, we got the G-Men at home. We see a little bit of value here. Bog, start us off with your assessment for the Giants here, because we obviously both like this game. And like I said, we're trying to keep our bias out of it, but we just really can't help ourselves in this spot.
Yeah, and I'm looking back at last year, and you see how the Giants and the Cowboys played. It was a very close game. And the Giants, they had a lot of injuries. I know the Cowboys went through some too, but both teams got significantly better in the offseason. Right, I think, you look at what the Giants did especially and what they brought in offensively, all the speed they brought in on offense and defense. I mean, you bring in Waller, you draft Jalen Hyatt, you bring in Paris Campbell. That's a lot of speed that's going to open things up for Saquon. Try to stabilize the interior, drafting John Michael Schmitz. So, the offense should be there, right? It's all, can the offensive line give Daniel Jones enough time? Because, that defensive front of Dallas is, it's no joke. So probably one of the best in the league. And defensively, the Giants got better too. They upgraded their depth on the defensive line. They got a lot of speed in the linebacking core and in the secondary, bringing in Bobby Okereke, Isaiah Simmons, and then drafting guys like Deontay Banks and Trey Hawkins. These are both big guys, right? They're both like over 6 foot and run 4.3. So a lot of speed on both sides of the ball. I think Giants keeping their offense and defense coordinator is going to be a big help, bring in some continuity. And I can totally see Dallas winning, so I'm not touching the money line. But I think getting the Giants at plus 3.5, I think that's a little bit enticing. So, I'm taking the G-Men at plus 3.5 here.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we said earlier in the show, when you're a home dog week 1, the betting trends are definitely in your favor. I believe the data comes out to about 66% of the time these home dogs getting points are going to be hitting in this week 1 position. But to back up what you said there, Bog, I really do like our G-Men in this spot. Now, I'm going to start with the Cowboys here because, again, this is nothing new. The Cowboys are one of the best rosters in the NFC. This is a team that's expected to make the postseason every year. They have a very powerful offense, especially held down by that amazing offensive line they have. So if Dak's able to come back this year and look a little bit more himself, which he started to play a little bit shaky at the end of last season, if Dak can really get going in week 1 here, this could really be a tough spot for the G-Men. But to back up what you said, the Giants have done a lot over the offseason. We brought in a lot of talent to finally surround Danny to try and help him elevate his own game. But even despite the talent we brought in this year, look what Danny was able to do last year. This is one of the most hated and underrated quarterbacks in football right now. This guy sported the best turnover rate of any quarterback in the league last year. He was extremely disciplined in Daboll's system. And one of the biggest contrarian points that people like to point to for this is that, well, Daboll was holding him back last year. They didn't allow Daniel to, actually throw the ball, air it out downfield, take risks. And I see that notion, but at the same time, I disagree. Within the first 3 to 4 weeks of that season, we lost 4 of our starting wide receivers. One of them wasn't to injury. As you all know, Kenny Galladay ended up proven he was a little bit of a bust for us last season after throwing him all that money a couple years prior. We lost Wan'Dale Robinson, Sterling Shepard, Kadarius Toney was in and out of injury. So Danny, just like that, was whittled down to his 5 through 8 wide receivers on his depth chart and was still able to get us to the postseason with a middle of the pack defense, bottom 10 offensive line. And I think that's just something that can't be ignored for this season, given all of the talent that Joe Shane has brought into this team to try and help Daboll, Kafka, and Wink really round out this roster. So like you said, the G-men at home getting the points, and not only points, but getting the hook at plus 3.5. The Giants have played the Cowboys close over the past couple seasons, especially last year under Daboll. Now, obviously in the second halves of, I believe both those games last year, the wheels kind of fell off the bus for the G-men, and that game got a little bit away from them. But coming into this season, a lot of optimism around this team. Obviously, we're high on our Giants, and given the plus 3.5 at home week 1 division game, you never know how division games are going to shake up. It could be a pretty stressful spot for Dak and the Cowboys here. So we're going to back the Giants in this spot, take our boys. And even if I didn't give this pick on the show, after an appropriate amount of beers on Sunday, I probably would be betting them anyway. So I'd be doing a disservice if I didn't give out this pick. So Bogdan and I are both backing the Giants at plus 3.5 in this position. And that is going to wrap it up for our betting slate for the week in terms of spreads. But one thing we want to do on this show as a recurring end of show pick is going to be our survivor pool. Bog and I are going to go in on a survivor pool via DraftKings, FanDuel. We're going to do 50-50. And just to add a little bit of extra content to the show every week, we're going to be giving you guys our survivor pick so you can not only follow along with us, but maybe you like our angles on a week-to-week basis and you want to tail us along the way. Hopefully we can stay alive and have a chance of that money by the end of the season. But Bog, tell the people, what do you think our safest pick is this week? And overall, how does that pick align with our survivor strategy for the 2023 season?
Yeah, absolutely. And, week 1 is always volatile. Teams come out, you don't know how they're going to look. So there's a lot of upsets, a lot of surprises. So I think you got to go as safe as possible. You got to take the best team. I think the best game this week is taking the Ravens over the Texans. Now, I love what the Texans did, bringing in D'Amico Ryans, drafting C.J. Stroud, Will Anderson. I just don't think they'll be able to upset the Ravens. The Ravens, with all the additions they had, still had one of the best defenses in football last year. Healthy Lamar with weapons. I think that's a pretty safe pick here. And, you want to use your good teams early. I know a lot of people like to save. I want to save the Chiefs for later in the year. I want to save the Bills, So I don't really like doing that personally because, it's the NFL. Injuries happen all the time. They can derail a season. So just use the best teams now, live to see another week, and then make your picks based on how it's going. So I think the Ravens versus the Texans is a pretty safe pick this year, week 1.
Absolutely. And that's exactly the strategy we're going for. The problem with survivor pools is sometimes people try and get too cute. They want to think, who's everybody else going to be picking and who's a safer team that I can go with that isn't going to follow the rest of the crowd. This way, in the event of an upset, most of the pool gets eliminated. And just like that, you already have a much better chance of making it to the end of your survivor pool. But the problem with that strategy is if you try and get too cute and the favorite does pull through and most of the pool stays alive, you might be putting yourself at risk to get bounced early. And I was actually talking to my dad about this. He was listening to a guy talk about his strategy for survivor pools, and something really resonated with me that he gave as a piece of advice. You really just have to make it through the first 4 to 6 weeks of a survivor pool. This is when most of these pools will get eliminated and fleeced out, just based off how volatile the NFL is, like you mentioned. So really on a week-to-week basis, you want to keep it simple, stupid simple. Go with the safest option you see. And for everything you mentioned, yeah, I do like what the Texans have done in the offseason this year. But given the fact that the Ravens do have one of the better defensive cores in the league, and having a healthy Lamar back with these weapons coming in, Zay Flowers from the draft, OBJ, if he could stay healthy, should be a nice change of pace for Lamar, not only having a tall presence, but also quick and agile alongside Mark Andrews, who was obviously a very reliable target for him. And especially the way that the Ravens get the run game going in these types of early season games. We really do think the Ravens are the best bet for your survivor pools this week. So we're going to be locking in the Ravens for our survivor pick, and we're feeling pretty confident about that. But that's going to wrap it up this week on No Hedge for our first NFL 2023 spread picks of the week 1 slate. Please give us some feedback on this. After last season, I was able to do pretty well gambling on the NFL. Ended up 50 units on the year after all was said and done once the postseason concluded after the Super Bowl. So that really was the inspiration to start this show and start this podcast. So hopefully we can replicate that success this season. And like I mentioned earlier on, not only win us some money, but hopefully bring you guys along on the ride with us. So thanks for tuning in for the first episode of No Hedge, and we will see you next week, hopefully with a little bit of extra money in our pockets. And if not, we should be all right. It's week 1. It's tough, and we will be able to bounce back. So thank you for watching. Give us your feedback, like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.